I never imagined that my own battle for life would become the backdrop of my wife's betrayal. I was 38 when I got diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. I remember the doctor's words as if they were etched into my bones. We caught it early enough to fight it, but you'll need surgery and a long course of chemotherapy. It felt like the ground beneath me collapsed. But oddly, I wasn't scared for myself. I was scared for my wife, Lauren. We had been married 10 years. She was a registered nurse at St. Catherine's Medical Center in New Jersey. Beautiful, smart, the kind of woman who could light up a room but never tried to. She used to hold my hand whenever I got a headache, tell me jokes when I was stressed about work, and bring me soup when I had the flu. I thought she'd be my anchor through the storm. At first, she was. When I told her about the cancer, she cried like someone had cut her soul open. She held me all night. We talked about treatments, second opinions, dietary changes, everything. She said, "We'll get through this together." But weeks passed, and her warmth began to fade. Subtle at first. She stopped checking in on me during her night shifts, even though I knew she had time. She started coming home later than usual, blaming charting delays and short-staffed nights. When I had my first chemo session, she wasn't there. Said her unit was shorthanded and she couldn't get coverage. But I knew nurses could swap shifts if they really needed to. That day, my friend Marcus came with me instead. He was the one who noticed how quiet I had gotten. I shrugged it off, said Lauren was just overwhelmed. But deep down, something was off. Her phone was suddenly on silent more often. She laughed at texts she wouldn't show me. She started showering right when she got home from work, something she never used to do. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the cancer was messing with my mind, making me suspicious and insecure. But even when we were in bed, there was distance. Not just physical, emotional. She stopped asking how I was feeling. She stopped sitting with me during my weaker days. I caught her staring into space more than once, her phone clenched tight in her hand like a secret. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up and found her downstairs on a video call. She ended it so fast when she saw me, I didn't even catch a face. It was just Jenna from work. She's going through stuff. But Jenna wasn't even on the same unit anymore. I knew that. I remember her telling me Jenna got transferred to outpatient last month. Still, I didn't press. I was too damn tired. My body was weak, my hair was falling out, and I felt like a ghost in my own home. The only place I had any peace was at the hospital during treatments. Ironically, the chemo nurses were more attentive than my own wife. Then came the worst part. My oncologist had to go on leave, and his replacement was a younger, charming doctor named Dr. Matthew Crane. Late 40s, salt and pepper hair, the kind of smile that made people instantly trust him. Lauren mentioned once before that she used to admire him back when she was in nursing school. He's brilliant, way too overqualified for this town. I didn't think much of it, but when I found out she was assigned to his team during my treatment weeks, something in my gut twisted. They said it was random, just scheduling, but what wasn't random was how much she suddenly started praising him at home. Dr. Crane really cares about his patients. He even brings snacks for the night staff sometimes. Dr. Crane says plant-based diets can really help chemo side effects. Maybe try it. I nodded along, but I was listening to how she said his name than what she said. I noticed she wore makeup on the days she worked with him. I noticed she wore perfume again. She never did that for months. I noticed she started locking her phone. One day, I came in early for treatment. She didn't know I was there yet. I walked by the break room and saw them. Her and Dr. Crane, laughing. She touched his arm. It was brief, maybe innocent, but not for me. Not when I hadn't felt her touch me like that in weeks. When they saw me, her smile froze. He gave me a polite nod. She avoided eye contact and said she'd be right out. That night, I asked her straight up, "Are you seeing someone else?" She looked shocked, offended even. "Are you serious? While you're fighting cancer? How could you even say that?" And I felt like a monster for asking, like the sickness was turning me into a paranoid wreck. So I apologized. But the ache in my chest wasn't from the chemo anymore. It was something deeper. Something was rotting under the surface, and I could smell it every time she walked through the door. A few days later, a patient in the chemo unit, an older guy named Glenn, sat next to me. We got to talking. He was funny, always joking about the hospital food and how the nurses were too pretty to be real. Then all of a sudden he said, "You know, that nurse Lauren, she's got something going on with that Crane guy, huh?" I froze. I asked what he meant. He shrugged. "Just saying. I've seen them sneaking off together behind the admin wing. Thought they were married until I saw you with you." My blood ran cold. That was the moment the illusion shattered. All the denial, all the rationalizing, it crumbled.
I didn't even finish my session. I told the nurse I felt sick and left. That night, I didn't confront her. I just watched, listened, waited. I needed proof. I needed to be sure, because the woman I married was either gone or had never really existed.
I started doing things I never thought I would, checking her phone when she was in the shower, watching her reflection in mirrors just to catch some hint of guilt. I even looked through her car one morning while she was still asleep, hoping to find what exactly? A love letter? A hotel receipt? I didn't know. I just needed something tangible, something real. But Lauren was careful, too careful. Her texts were clean, her call logs were empty, and even her email had two-factor authentication now. It felt like I was living with a stranger who wore my wife's skin. Then one day, I installed a small voice recorder in our bedroom. I hated myself for it. It made me feel disgusting. But at that point, I needed answers more than I needed pride. I didn't even know what I was hoping to catch. Maybe a whispered call, a confession to a friend, anything. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early. I watched her from under the covers. She stayed up, scrolling on her phone, then went downstairs quietly. I heard nothing. Just silence. But the next morning, I checked the recording. Nothing. Static. Breathing. Her muttering to herself about laundry. And then, barely audible, "He's getting suspicious." My heart nearly stopped. Her voice. She said it so low I almost thought I imagined it. But there it was, followed by silence. Then another voice. Male. Faint, but familiar. "It's okay. Just keep calm. He won't do anything without proof." It was Dr. Crane. I recognized his tone immediately. Smooth, controlled, like he was explaining a treatment plan, except now the patient was me and the disease was betrayal. My body went cold. I couldn't breathe for a second. She was speaking to him, in my house. While I was pretending to sleep upstairs, she was whispering with the man who was supposed to help keep me alive. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The pain was so sharp, so sudden, it bypassed tears and went straight into some numb place inside me. That day, I didn't go to treatment. I didn't eat. I just sat in my car outside the hospital watching the entrance. I waited until Lauren's shift started. I watched her walk in, hair tied perfectly, smiling at security like she hadn't just broken me into 1,000 pieces. And then he arrived, Dr. Crane. He parked right next to her, got out, didn't touch her, didn't speak, but they walked in together, side by side, like a team, like partners, like lovers. I wanted to smash the windshield. I wanted to walk in and scream, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed more. That night, I did something I'm still not proud of. I pretended to be asleep again. She took a shower, left her phone on the nightstand. I took it, went to the bathroom, locked the door, and opened the Notes app. People forget about the Notes app. It's where they save things they're not ready to delete. And there it was, a note titled D. Just a single letter. Inside were fragments. Not even full sentences, just thoughts. "He'll hate me. Can't keep lying. Matt says he'll wait. What if he dies before I tell him?" That last one, that was the one that broke me. Not the cheating, not the lies, not even the sneaking around. It was the fact that she was planning to tell me, but only after I died. Like my death was her exit strategy, her clean slate. She was waiting for me to disappear so she could move on without guilt. Like I was just a chapter she couldn't wait to close. I put the phone back, lay down, and stared at the ceiling for hours. The woman I had married, the one who once promised to be with me in sickness and in health, had decided that sickness meant she could start building a life with someone else. And the worst part? She still kissed me goodbye the next morning like nothing was wrong. I started keeping a journal. Not for healing, not for therapy, but as a record, a timeline. A way to keep my sanity intact while I slowly unraveled. I wrote down everything. Her words, her moods, the shifts in her behavior. I noted every lie, every strange absence, every hollow smile. I even logged the nights she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. And I waited. I waited for one of them to make a mistake big enough to blow it all wide open. I didn't know how long I had left. The chemo was hitting me harder each cycle. My body was decaying and my heart had already rotted from the inside out. But I was going to see this through. I wasn't going to die without letting them know I knew, without making them feel the weight of what they did to me,
without watching the truth destroy them like the cancer was destroying me. I stopped talking about my treatments at home. I told Lauren I didn't want to burden her with medical details anymore. She seemed relieved. That hurt more than I thought it would. A real partner would insist. A real wife would press for every update, every lab result. But she just nodded and said, "Whatever makes you comfortable, babe," and went back to her phone. That was my first step, cutting her off from the information she used to navigate around me. If she was hiding something, I needed to make her feel safe enough to slip. I told her I was thinking about transferring to a different hospital, said I heard good things about a facility upstate. At first she protested, said St. Catherine's was the best, that switching mid-treatment would be risky. But then she stopped pushing, almost like she was testing if I was serious. I wasn't. I just wanted to see how far she'd go to keep me under Dr. Crane's care. When I didn't bring it up again, she didn't either. That told me everything. I started skipping treatments, told her I was still going but needed alone time. She bought it. She never checked. Not once. The woman who once cried watching me take ibuprofen now couldn't even be bothered to confirm if I was hooked up to poison every Tuesday. That gave me more freedom. I started visiting the hospital without letting her know. I'd sit in the parking lot, watching the staff come and go. I even made small talk with a few nurses I recognized from before, subtly asking about Dr. Crane's schedule. One day, I saw them. Her and Crane. Not touching, but laughing. Standing way too close near the side exit. Then he looked around and gently touched her lower back as they walked back in. It was brief, but deliberate. Not a mistake. Not innocent. I snapped a photo with my phone from the car. Blurry, yes, but unmistakably them. Step 2. Get someone inside. I reached out to a guy I hadn't spoken to in years. Tommy. He used to date Lauren's friend Karen. He was a security contractor now, did some camera work for private clients. I told him the situation, offered him money to install a small camera near our living room entryway and another in the garage where Lauren sometimes took private calls. He hesitated at first, said it felt dirty, but when I showed him the screenshot and told him I had cancer, his face changed. He did it for free. Said, "No man should be lied to while he's dying." I hated hearing that word. Dying. But it was the truth. My prognosis wasn't great. The chemo wasn't working like they'd hoped. But if I had to go down, I wasn't going to go down blind. Days passed, then weeks. I kept acting normal, smiling when she came home, asking how work was, pretending to be too tired for intimacy so she wouldn't have to fake desire. I was letting her build her world of lies while quietly collecting bricks. Then, one Friday night, I got what I needed. She came home at midnight, said she had to cover an extra shift. Didn't know I was still awake, sitting in the dark on the stairs. She didn't see me. She walked in, sighed, and whispered, "You're a bad influence," and giggled. Then her phone lit up. Dr. Crane's name. A heart emoji next to it. She answered, tiptoed into the garage, closed the door. I waited. 27 minutes later, she came out humming. I didn't say a word. Just went back to bed. The next morning, I checked the footage. It was all there. Her voice, his voice. Clearer than anything I could have dreamed of. You think he suspects? I don't know. He's been acting distant, quiet, but he's sick. He's always tired. You should start preparing. He's not getting better. And if he goes, we can finally be public. Do you really think that's possible? We're halfway there. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just sex. It was a future. They were planning a life after me. They were waiting for me to die so they could take the next step, so they could go to dinners and introduce each other to friends without shame. I copied the footage to a flash drive. I printed screenshots. I organized every date, every piece of evidence, every note she ever wrote in that cursed D folder. And then I booked an appointment with a lawyer. His name was Brian Mercer, a tough old divorce attorney in Newark. When I walked into his office and told him I had terminal cancer and my wife was sleeping with my doctor, he didn't blink. He said, "You'd be surprised how often I hear this. The difference is most men don't have your level of preparation." He looked through the folder, watched 10 minutes of video, closed the laptop. He said, "I can ruin them both. But you need to decide. Do you want revenge or do you want peace?" I didn't answer, because in that moment, I didn't know. All I knew was that I wasn't going to keep pretending. Not much longer. They thought I was weak. They thought I was fading. But I was wide awake, and I had nothing left to lose. I spent the next few days perfecting the setup. I wasn't going to confront her with just a flash drive and a few blurry screenshots. I wanted her to feel it. Feel the depth of the betrayal, feel how low she had sunk, feel just how deeply she underestimated me.
I called my treatment center and told them I needed to postpone the next 2 chemo sessions, citing nausea and emotional fatigue. They understood. The irony is, the only thing keeping me emotionally intact was the very war I was preparing to start. I told Lauren that the chemo hit me hard and that I didn't want her seeing me like that anymore. I said I'd be staying with my brother, Evan, a few towns over. It was a lie. Evan had moved to Arizona 2 years ago, but she didn't even question it, just nodded and gave me a half hug like I was a coworker clocking out early. "Let me know if you need anything," she said, without looking up from her phone. I packed a bag, drove 2 blocks, parked in a friend's garage, and walked back under the cover of night. I stayed in the house for 3 days, silent, watching, listening. I lived off protein bars and bottled water in the attic, set up a baby monitor linked to the living room, kept a burner phone in case I needed to call 911. I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. On the second night, it happened. She brought him over. Not even subtle. No shame, no paranoia. She parked in the garage, opened the side door, and Crane followed her in like he owned the place. I watched through a sliver in the attic vent as they laughed, poured wine, and sat on the couch I had bled on after my second biopsy. They kissed like it was their home. They moaned like it was their bed. I pressed record on every device I had. I wanted every second of it. The next morning, they left separately. Her to the hospital, him to his own car, parked down the block, like criminals pretending to be normal. I waited another hour, then came downstairs and started preparing. I printed everything. Text logs, call history, screenshots, transcripts from the camera mics. I slid it all into a manila envelope, marked with one word: truth. Then I wrote her a letter. Not an angry one, not emotional, just facts, lined up clean like clinical notes in a patient file. I wrote, "By the time you read this, I will have delivered copies of everything to HR at St. Catherine's, to the medical board, and to Dr. Crane's wife." I ended it with, "You could have helped me fight to live. Instead, you counted down my death. I hope your future together was worth my soul." I sealed it and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I went to the hospital, not as a patient, but as a man on a mission. I asked to speak with the director of medical ethics. Told the receptionist it was about Dr. Crane. She looked concerned. Within 15 minutes, I was sitting in an office with a stiff man in a gray tie and a legal pad. I laid everything out: names, dates, evidence, recordings, hospital policies violated. Affairs between doctors and nurses weren't strictly illegal, but when it involved a patient's wife and a physician's deliberate manipulation of trust, it became a violation of ethical codes and workplace conduct. I could see the man's face tighten with each piece of evidence I showed him. When I was done, he asked if I wanted to press charges. I told him no, not yet. I wanted him investigated. I wanted it on record, and I wanted Lauren removed from my care team immediately, even if I stayed under the hospital's umbrella. He agreed, promised an immediate internal review. But I wasn't done. I drove straight to Dr. Crane's home address. I had found it by cross-referencing tax records and social media breadcrumbs. Suburb, clean lawn, big windows. I rang the doorbell and a woman answered. Pretty, early 40s, tired eyes. She looked like me, like she knew something was off. "Mrs. Crane?" I asked. She nodded. "I think you should see this." I handed her an envelope. Inside were photos, transcripts, and a note that simply said, "Your husband is sleeping with my wife while treating me for cancer." She didn't cry. Not in front of me. She just stared at the envelope like it had poison on it. Then closed the door. I left without another word. I didn't need to see the aftermath. I had planted the seeds. I returned home later that night. Lauren hadn't come back yet. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I sat on the couch, my couch, and waited. 30 minutes later, the door slammed open. She was crying. Not the kind of crying that comes from guilt, the kind that comes from being caught. "How could you?" she screamed. "You went to the hospital? To his wife? What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't move, didn't blink. "I gave you every chance to come clean. I begged you, without saying a word, to choose me. You chose him." She walked closer, eyes red, breathing shallow. "You don't understand." "No," I cut in. "You don't. You were supposed to fight with me. Instead, you were preparing for life without me while I was dying in front of you." She went quiet, just stood there shaking. Then she whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I actually laughed. That's what everyone says. You didn't mean to. You just fell into bed with the man prescribing my meds. She tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. It's over, Lauren. You can have him. You'll probably need him. Because when I'm gone, you'll still be stuck with what you did. I walked past her, upstairs, and locked the door. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how someone could look at a dying man and still lie through their teeth. And for the first time since my diagnosis, I wasn't scared of death anymore. I was scared of surviving. Because surviving meant waking up to a world where the person I loved most had already mourned me and replaced me.
The days that followed were quieter than I expected. There was no yelling, no tears, no begging for forgiveness. Lauren moved into the guest room without a word. She stopped making coffee in the mornings, stopped asking if I'd taken my meds, stopped pretending. She was just there, a shadow. The woman who once kissed my forehead before every appointment now passed me in the hallway like a stranger in a hotel. I started receiving calls, one from the hospital's ethics committee informing me that Dr. Crane had been placed on temporary suspension pending a full investigation, another from a staff liaison letting me know that Lauren had voluntarily stepped away from her position until the matter is resolved. I didn't respond to either. I just sat at the dining table, staring at the place where she used to sit, remembering how she used to reach across to grab my hand when I was too weak to lift my fork. Now that same hand had traced someone else's chest, held someone else's body, while mine was shutting down cell by cell. The truth had spread through the hospital like wildfire. A friend of mine from the radiology department called me one night. He didn't even say hello, just, "Man, I'm so sorry. Everyone knows. She hasn't shown up since Friday. Crane's wife kicked him out. Word is he's living in some hotel downtown." I didn't feel satisfaction. Not the way I thought I would. I felt hollow, like revenge had filled me up with dust instead of justice. One morning I came downstairs to find Lauren sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes bloodshot. She didn't say anything, just slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. It was a letter, written in her handwriting. No greeting, just sentences. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I don't know when I stopped being your wife and started being someone I don't even recognize. Matt made me feel seen again, but I see now it was selfish and weak. I will leave if that's what you want, but if there's even 1% of you that still believes I'm worth something, I'll stay and take whatever you give me. I folded the paper and pushed it back toward her. You don't get to ask for pieces of me now. Not after you broke the whole thing. She nodded, didn't argue. That scared me more than anything. The silence. The acceptance. Like she had already grieved this marriage and was just waiting for me to bury it. The next week I resumed chemo. Alone. I checked myself in, sat in the plastic chair, let the needle slide into my arm. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine a version of this life where she had stayed faithful, where she had held my hand and told me I was still strong. But that version didn't exist. It had never existed. I came home that night to find the house clean, quiet, and Lauren gone. Her closet half empty. A note on the fridge said, "I'll stay with my sister. You need space. I understand." I didn't chase her. I didn't call. I just sat in the living room with all the lights off and listened to the sound of my own breathing. It was the only sound that proved I was still alive. My lawyer called the next day, said we could proceed with the divorce anytime I was ready, that all the documentation was done, but I didn't answer him right away. I needed to sit with the pain a little longer. I needed to understand what it meant to survive something like this, not just the cancer, but the collapse of everything I believed in. I started writing again, not just logs or evidence or notes. I wrote memories. The day we met, our wedding vows, the time she snuck a get-well balloon into my chemo room and the nurses made fun of me. I wrote them down because I didn't know what else to do with them. I couldn't throw them away. They were real ones, even if she wasn't. I ran into Glenn again, the old patient who had first tipped me off. He was walking slower this time. Dinner. I asked him how he was doing. He smiled. "Still kicking. Guess we both are, huh?" I nodded. "Barely." He looked at me, eyes sharper than they had any right to be. "You know, surviving ain't always the blessing people think it is. Sometimes dying would have been easier than dealing with the mess left behind." I didn't know how to respond to that. Maybe because part of me agreed. But I also knew I wasn't done yet. Not with life, not with myself, and definitely not with the story. Because if I was going to survive, I needed the pain to mean something.
It took me another month to make the call. I had stared at the divorce papers more times than I could count, flipped through them like they were just another prescription label. Name, date, signature. And still, I hesitated. Not because I still loved her. I didn't know if I even remembered how. But because ending something that once meant everything always feels like a funeral. And I'd already been to too many of those in my mind. Lauren texted me twice a week, short messages. Hope treatment went okay. Let me know if you need groceries. I never replied. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't want to give her false hope. She needed to feel what I felt, silence where there used to be warmth. One night, I stood in our bedroom, now only mine, and opened our wedding album. We had taken photos on a pier in Cape May, both laughing like we didn't know what pain was. There was one shot, just one, where she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at me, her eyes soft, proud, in love. I stared at it for a long time, then closed the album and put it in a box. Some memories aren't meant to be burned, but they also don't belong on shelves. The next morning I met with Brian, my lawyer. We filed the papers. No contest, no fighting over assets, no court drama. Lauren signed without changing a word. That was her last grace to me, letting me go without a battle. I watched her walk out of the courthouse in a navy coat and messy bun. No makeup, just the version of her I used to love before all the lies. She looked back once. I didn't wave, I didn't nod. I just watched her disappear, like a chapter ending mid-sentence. A few weeks later, I got my blood work results. The chemo had slowed the spread, not reversed it, not stopped it, but it gave me more time. Maybe months, maybe a year. I didn't ask for specifics. Time means nothing if you don't know what to do with it. I started going on walks, cooking for myself, picking up old books I never finished. I called my brother in Arizona and told him I might visit. I even bought a used camera and started taking photos again. People on the street, birds on wires, rusted benches, anything that felt real. One afternoon while walking through the park, I saw a couple sitting on a blanket. She was feeding him strawberries, laughing like the world had no knives. And for a brief second, I wondered what it would feel like to trust someone again, to believe that love doesn't always rot in silence. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. But for now, I was breathing, alone, whole. And that was enough. I had survived the betrayal, the sickness, the silence. And as strange as it sounds, surviving was the hardest part, because living after the person you love stops loving you, that's not healing, that's rebirth. And rebirth always comes with fire.